It's always very exciting, and I'm always intrigued by the wonderful guests we have here who are here to really share some knowledge so you can get some valuable takeaways for your time, effort that you invest here. The day's overall topic is B2B LinkedIn strategy, and the subtopic, because the gentlemen here, Carl and Pat Linden, um, are in that sphere. So it's always great to have experts who are doing it every day, but not only that, who are on the ground knowing what's happening, and getting that vibe. So with that said, Pat, why don't you introduce yourself, give everybody a little context, and what your initial thoughts on buying and selling uh, businesses.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Don, for having me. I kind of followed loosely what you're doing. I think it's awesome. Um, Carl, pleasure to meet you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. I appreciate the opportunity a lot. Pat Linden, I'm the founder of Linden Law Partners. We're a boutique kind of middle market and lower middle market deal shop, you could say, primarily focused on, for the most part, sell side, sort of, as we say, life changing events when you're selling your company for entrepreneurs, interfacing with private equity and institutional investors and so on. You probably are the best of the best of your business, but I'm guessing you haven't been through that process. That's kind of our ideal client profile. We also raise a lot of capital and do kind of any and all things, partnerships and so forth. I've been doing this for 23 years. I came out of big firms. I was always trying to find ways to not be a lawyer. I was involved. I started an early stage venture capital fund. I know exactly what it's like to lose money and make the wrong decisions on investments, which I'd like to think I've learned a lot in terms of advising clients. I also started an early stage cannabis company because I thought there was opportunity back in the Wild West days. So that led to Linden Law Partners, and we're just a deal shop in that we are kind of entrepreneurs that represent entrepreneurs and really are your advocates and try to get you the most money and keep as much money as you possibly can in your lifetime transactions.
Hey, that's terrific. And the reason I say that is because you seem to be fitting the mold of someone who is open to change, has made changes, has had some highs and lows, and learned from it. And really, I think the key is, how do you get your message to your most relevant audience in the most cost and time efficient way, right? And if you had time instead of 5 seconds or 10 seconds, or getting somebody's attention where people are around a room getting to see who you are, how you are with other people, it builds that trust, likability factor. So when you get to working with someone, that's already in place, versus everything sounds good. Now let's find out who each other is, but we're already committed. Carl, you're one of the most dynamic players that I know. And what's so cool is you're getting so much visibility from your own live streaming, because one reason I love pairing people up is Carl was just a step or two ahead of Pat with embracing live stream about 3-4 months ago, was the fastest to launch his live stream show. And so why don't you share that and what your thoughts on businesses are?
Sure. I'm Carl Dakin. I act as a consultant. I assist small businesses primarily in raising capital. And I've been experimenting with different ways of building my brand and getting the word out, so I wasn't invisible to most of the 8 billion people on the planet. And I came across what Don was doing with LinkedIn Live, and it looked superior to what I'd been doing with podcasting because the interaction with the audience, the live event, just has a completely different style and tenor to it. And I was feeling I was getting feedback, from that format that I didn't get from podcasting. So I talked with Don, and Don said he would take me on under his wing and teach me everything he knows, which would take 100 years because I haven't done hundreds and hundreds of shows. So I'm just learning a little bit of what he knows. But I joined a cohort of other people who are also interested in building a LinkedIn Live show a couple months ago. And while we were working on learning the show, I started a newsletter at Don's Advice, which has now gone up to over 580 subscribers in just a couple months. And I've now done 3 LinkedIn Live shows, with my third one last Tuesday. I'm doing them weekly, whereas I'm doing my newsletter daily, which still hasn't posted today for technical issues, which annoy me, but we'll skip over that. But today's topic is on buying and selling businesses. And interestingly enough, amongst the great diversity of projects I'm working on to help raise money, I now have a new client who is looking to help buy boomer businesses to help them survive and transition into new management so that those businesses don't disappear from the face of the earth. And when they do that, particularly in smaller communities, this will have a huge negative impact on loss of jobs and everything in that community. So I'm just getting up to speed on every flavor and type of money that might be available to facilitate the purchase of a business and transitioning of a brand new management team. And I'm much looking to learn from today's conversation about your experience, because you are super focused on buying and selling businesses. And this is just one of many things that I'm trying to deal with.
Well, that sounds great. Omar's here. I want to recognize Omar. Omar has the Zoom party show. He also has a show is Who Is, and then your name comes after it. I've been on both shows. And actually, my grandson, who's 11, was just on the show Sunday, competing with a 10-year-old boy from India in a Jeopardy type of format. And everybody got gift cards, and it was really great. So thanks, Omar. Bringing it back to Pat, I think that the challenge is getting to distinguish and differentiate yourself in a crowded market that people are talking over people, getting salesy. The louder, the meaner seem to get the most attention. When, I think Carl can agree, and everybody who's on this show, either audience or panelists, is it's really about relationship building, right? And getting to know each other over time, but dealing with more people over time. But, as we're starting to kind of figure this thing out, and Carl, as part of the collaboration group with 5 other people here, is really understanding best practices, right? Having a great show without knowing how to promote it, without knowing how to invite people to it, because LinkedIn allows you 1,000 invites a week. And actually, Harvey has perfected that. And he's doing 1,000 invites, and he's getting like huge percentages of people showing up out of that. And he systematized it. So, this is science and art in a sense. And it's really a lot to do with work ethic, creativity, and the joy one may have in communicating, getting their word out and getting their voice heard. So, Pat, what have you been doing on LinkedIn prior to considering live streaming?
I was kind of fairly early to the game in LinkedIn, I think in the attorney world, where we were sort of trying to get our message out there. I think you're 100% correct, Don. Let me just take this a step back in what you were saying. I view buying and selling a business as preparation is everything. I think and that ties into the relationship element that you're talking about. The mistake that, Carl, I'm guessing you see the same thing. 98%, not 50%, not 35, 98% of sellers are going to put themselves at a disadvantage because they don't understand what you just said. And what they're going to do is they have a very misguided perception of what actual life-changing or capital raise or sale events are. It is not I hire my estate planning attorney. I think that they're plugging in blanks, not to say that that's what estate planning attorneys do, but there's a misperception of how easy it is, and there's a misperception of the roles and this, that, and the other. And what that means is oftentimes somebody has got themselves way too far down the line before going to somebody that they can trust, who is a deal maker. Carl will get this. A great deal maker knows more than just finance. A great deal maker knows more than just law. In fact, the legal part is the easiest thing that I do at this part in my career. It's the other elements and balancing all the demands. So going back to your point, we began sort of trying to promote what we believe is very authentic, what I just described with you, amongst many other things, what the actual process of the deal is through blogs and this, that, and the other. What we began to learn and see, and we would promote that on LinkedIn. And as you know, most people have a 5th grade attention span and so forth. So we began to learn that with the algorithms and everything, we needed to be more proactive in trying to have these kinds of conversations where people could put a name to a face and go, that's somebody that I would like to have with me. And now I have a different perspective, because we're also inundated with literature. How do you actually pick who knows what they're doing? And I think, going to your point, with the type of stuff we do, you're going to be way better off developing a relationship with someone like myself well in advance. And so for me, the name of the game, and this is part of my evolution, is utilizing these kind of platforms to get out to the masses more readily than having a single coffee event or so forth, to really personalize what we're all about and really educate people well before the fact in what they need to do, which a lot of isn't legal. It's, you need to stage your business just like you would stage a house for sale, and not come with a fire drill project after you've gotten yourself half in bed with a Wall Street titan who's done 1,000 of these and you've done none. If that makes sense, that is not the time that you're going to build your leverage. So easier said than done, but I think what you're doing, Don, and this is a great aspect. So I'm trying to, game the algorithm at this point, and really kind of, I'm a novice at this, but begin to do this type of thing to really get that authentic message out, because there's nothing more authentic than hearing it from the horse's mouth. So that's why I'm so excited about what you've developed here.
Well, you make some wonderful points, and it's clear to the average, let's say, person who does have a lot of misunderstanding, doesn't have a lot of awareness, are dealing with emotion, are dealing with ego. Everybody's businesses is worth more, they think, than it really is, because they forget that when the business sold, they're out of it, and they were the majority of what was worth it, right? So you can't have it both ways, but it's so much better to be able to have a consistent message that you can develop to explain everything, right? To go through and say, here are the misunderstandings that people have when they sell a business, and have an event that says selling your business event, right? Because Carl's thing is, well, when he's here every other week, it's a successful funding event, right? So, and then it only goes out to there's so much to it. We don't want to get into detail, but everybody who's a speaker could have invited 1,000 people to this show, for this show. So if we can figure out how to get people to promote themselves better, right? Showing up and leaving is the content. Getting the traffic, keeping the audience, and having something that says, hey, that was a great presentation that the 3 of you put together. And next week, it's going to cover this, because when you got consistent spots, you can plan around them and develop them and have 2 weeks to really put it together. And what's so great is once you figure it out, you figured it out. You don't have to figure it out again. You just have to do it. And that gives you a huge competitive advantage. So I see Omar's here. I see a lot of people are watching the show. happy to find out where you're at. I find when I do invite people, they kind of are a little bit shy. But yeah, glad to recognize you, where you're at, what you're doing, whatever you have a question for us. So Carl, how is your learning curve moving towards how you try to connect and communicate with your relevant audience?
Yeah, so kind of 2 points that Pat put on the tables. There are days I will take your 5-year-old attention span over that of a fully grown adult who has already decided they don't need to listen or learn or do anything new or different. But
At least you can mold the 5-year-old.
yes, right. They're still teachable. But I think one of the hardest things that I have seen, Pat, and I know you're dealing with this, is that when a person goes to sell a business, it's like putting their kid in college, with mom's crying and dad's hugging and, doing all kinds of emotional stuff because they are giving up who they are to someone else. And so when that goes to happen, they want people who are advising them who understand how deeply this means to them, how much respect they have to give to the fact that this is an end of a career. It's the end of a storyline. And what I see in LinkedIn Live is that this is an opportunity where I can develop a relationship. It may be very thin. It may be only a fifth grade attention span, but nonetheless, by being there consistently, as Don has pointed out to me, what I'm proving to people is that I'm here. I'm ready. I'm on standby. I can work with you whenever you're ready to pull the trigger and do something with regard to funding, whether it's related to buying and selling a business or some other thing. And it's the authenticity of your program, the fact that you're not selling, you're just basically there and saying, I'm here if and when you need me, is something that LinkedIn Live allows you to do. So when they do make the decision, they want to do something, whatever it is, and it's this important to them in selling their business, then one, you're visible all the time. So instead of them calling their cousin or somebody else, to help them out with the sale of the business, they're going, hey, I should call Pat. He's doing this program. He's an expert in the area. The other thing that's interesting, I've talked to Don about this, is that by publishing my newsletter, even before I started my LinkedIn Live show, by being a daily event going out, I had people who have known me, and I've got a large network of people who know me but weren't doing anything with me, that I rose to top of mind, where suddenly they're like, oh yeah, I need somebody who could help me with that. I'll call Carl and we'll get something going. And it's about a 10-to-1 ratio right now between people coming from my past as opposed to anybody new showing up, which is perfectly fine with me because I know enough people that I'm staying busy. But the same thing here is that LinkedIn Live gives you that ability, even on a weekly basis, like my show and my guest appearances on Don's show, to say I'm here. And that it isn't like necessarily they're listening deep or they're trying to absorb a whole bunch of information, but you're present, and that presence conveys itself to them as making you a person that they want to keep in mind. Even if it's at the back of their mind, it's close enough so that when they connect the dots and they need somebody, they're going to reach out.
Well, that justifies that philosophy of being known before you're needed. And, this is not a group, or you don't build a community of clients. You build a community of colleagues who have influence, who can elevate and amplify your reach. And you need to get more aware of what the other side is thinking, right? Because when someone isn't taking your message and returning it, you got a loop in your head. When you get to talk to people and they say, well, if it would have been like this or would have been like that, having a show is like leaning into a polishing wheel. You put out your stuff and you get back the response, and then you get the round robin, what's going on. And pretty soon people are picking up little pieces of this, if nothing else, but to create a question in one's mind. And, I think the key is everybody's got to fast forward and say, is what I'm doing sustainable and expansive? Or is it just a competitive brawl out there and everybody's got to go out and catch as catch can? But you know what that does? It affects your quality of life because now you're trading time for money. And then you got to get what comes with that transaction. If you're in a pull strategy where you got more than you can handle or are comfortably handling, you get to pick, right? Who am I going to have the most fun with? Who am I going to have the most satisfaction? And who can I be most successful with, right? Because sometimes you can't want something more than the person you're trying to help. And you can't do things for them that they need to do for themselves. So if demand was not an issue, then people could actually practice their art versus trying to be a marketer or, and that's to your point, Pat, everybody's trying to game the system because they don't know how to use the system, right? And they're looking for shortcuts. They're looking for a grab here, a grab there. But, I think the key is everybody's market is bigger than they handle right now.
Yeah.
And the other thing is people work in their little neighborhood, and it's not like that anymore. The other thing I'll say is when your marketing and brand strategy is successful, your business model changes. So it's not like you started here, added all this good stuff, and then you were just here with some of the good stuff. Pretty soon you decide, hey, maybe thought leadership is where I need to be. Maybe working through people. If someone says, hey, you could plan to have 50 relevant individuals in your community show up for an hour for you on a platform like this, that's far more preferable from a cost and time saving element. But also the key is not to have a direct sales approach, but a stair step, right? Educate people, get to know people. And then from here, the next step I've got a workshop, right? So you used a show to promote the next educational thing. It's a free workshop. So as a bonus to everybody sitting here, you're invited. And during that time, now you're focused on, here's what I do, here's how I do it. And if you're interested, here's how we can do business. And here's the other element. When 7, 8 people are doing the same thing in their own industries, their own way, and then they come together and say, hey, I just figured this thing out. And some of these are just little elements that, I launched my second newsletter. I didn't know you could have 5. And if you have a big enough population, everybody in that population gets notified. In a week, I've got almost 5,000 in that new one, along with 12,000 in my old one. And my old one's a daily. This new one's a weekly. But, at a certain point, and Harvey's been the front runner, and here's Harvey. Harvey, me and Harvey can almost read minds. We're actually talking together. Hey, chaps, good to be here on a train with terrible Wi-Fi, but listening where I can. Harvey's out in England. He runs franchising for the Coffee Republic. Harvey's story is totally off the wall. He came into the audience about 6-7 months ago, and anybody who's in the audience enough, I got to reach out and say, what's going on? What do you think? What could I do to do better? So I don't come here feeling I'm doing them a favor, right? They're doing us a favor. So make a long story short, Harvey did every other Fridays, then start doing every other Sundays. He'd be parking under overpasses when he couldn't get it to home in time. I mean, just unbelievable work ethic and great personality. So anyways, he started a franchise show. And it shot up to #1 of all franchise shows. There's like 300 of them a week. And he's only been franchising 11 months. His show has attracted everybody. He's talking to sponsors now who want to be part of it. He connected with the international franchise event company that does 200 of these, and he's working those things. And now he's booked till August. and considering adding 2 more shows, which is international franchising. And he did figure out the marketing side. He did figure out and we were just talking about it in our collaboration group yesterday, how he's really picking great guests, that are relevant. It's only franchise oriented people. It's not just, how to get up in the morning and do better. So anyways, I'm always plugging Harvey. Harvey's always plugging me. In a sense, we sponsor each other and we profile each other, because 7, 8, 10 people together in a planned way does so much better than an individual who by accident stumbles here, figures out here. I mean, the idea is getting to where you're going as fast and easy and comfortable as you can. Life shouldn't have to be a struggle. Work should be play when you do it right. And success is based on value, right? And most people have tremendous value and no awareness, no penetration. And they're not as snazzy, right? They're not as exciting on the surface. But that's the key to having these conversations over an hour. Carl's right. People don't come here with notepads and, checking everything. But all of a sudden it's like, hey. And if you do it over time, you don't have to get it all or nothing. Take a bite today, come back next week, take another bite, and I'll get better. You'll get better. We'll get better. And then what you find is, what's the return on time and thought? So, most cases, it's not this and that. It's like review and audit it, right? I mean, if you're selling a business, you're going to go through a checklist of elements that you got to know to be helpful. Well, if you can show somebody you're spending twice as much time, getting half as much benefit, and it's going nowhere, why keep wasting time? Because you're not selling somebody on LinkedIn. They're already here. You're not selling somebody on doing stuff that's already happening. So it really comes down to best practices and community, right? Because if you can't do it, could we do it? Does somebody know anybody or anything that could help somebody? And I think that's where this is really like being on the track and taking your car out and racing it. But the collaboration group is coming back and saying, here's what I learned. What can we do? So with that said, Pat, since you're new here, what thoughts do you have to all the thoughts we've just had?
There's a lot of thoughts there. I think it makes a ton of sense. Listen, I'm not trying to pretend that I know the entire game. I think I understand it, but as you know, it's all about execution. I think even this strategy is execution. I work really closely with my wife, who's a great marketing person and a hustler and all that. Hopefully she's watching this, but we're constantly, trying to come up with ideas to really get our message out there. I think this is a good way to do it because, and so I really I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. I think you have a more refined way of putting it than me because you've got so much experience now. But going back to the idea of selling and buying businesses and why this is on point is I always, for example, have a conversation with most of my best clients. I have probably the biggest, if you did Carl will understand this. My business, for good or for bad, would be an example of a customer concentration problem you don't want to have. Meaning the way that we sort of made the business profitable is we're a deal shop. And when times are good, or maybe a little luck runs together, like a couple of years ago, we had a record year and we had several kind of a confluence of factors. We had those connections, Carl, that were, 4 or 5 years ago, and 3 of them came together at the same time and they wanted to sell their business. And I was thinking, I've got it made. I mean, I'm going to retire early and all that. Then the economy changed. And then I remembered, wow, not having a couple of those deals can really make a huge difference because we're not doing things like, we form companies, we do all the stuff that corporate lawyers do, but what really moves the needle is that one-time event. And that's actually what we enjoy. And it's stressful as all get out, but it's that. So getting back to that philosophy, when I get a client inquiry, the absolute best representations that work, it's very interesting. I'll kind of take them through what the deal process is from beginning to end. Oftentimes, this might be in a 1-hour phone call, and the client becomes completely educated. They came in thinking this should be $5,000 and you're going to rubber stamp a purchase agreement. And by the time you're done, you educate them, no, this might be $250,000 or $100,000, but it's going to be worth it and it's going to multiply your thing, and this is your legacy. And it's in a very authentic way, and kind of describing to them what the process is. The process is, I don't sleep for 3 or 4 months. The process is, it's hard on my family. It's hard on my kids. I have 2 young kids. Ultimately, people will buy that. Some will and some won't. But the ones that are the best clients will buy it because they know that you're going to be in the trenches with them. So that's a very hard message to build in a 30-second conversation for the first time. I always tell my prospective clients, I mean, because I am radically transparent, I go, we have to re-educate you on everything that you thought about the process of selling your business. We have to re-educate you on what your business brokers told you, because they know part of it. They don't know the whole thing. We have to re-educate you on what your investment banker told you. They know part of it. They don't know the whole thing. We have to re-educate you on what your country club friends told you. So why I'm kind of bringing this up, and what I've really wanted to do, and this is kind of eye-opening, Don, is really bring that sort of discussion in a forum well before the fact, because it's really hard to go from 0 to 100 in that kind of relationship when you have absolutely no connection to the person. So I love the idea, kind of like what Carl said, you're getting up, people are able to see you, they're able to believe you, they understand what you're going to be going through as well. You're not just going to be on the back end outsourcing it to somebody overseas and whatever, which I deal with all the time, by the way, on various different vendors that we have. So that to me is kind of what I think the real benefit of this is, that I'm sort of seeing, and I didn't totally understand it. And, Don, you and I talked a little bit the other day of, like, I have a podcast. I'm really excited about it, but I'm not sure the podcast gives the level of depth, because it's not live when people see it anyway. So really all about it, like everything, I think for all of us, we have a limited amount of time. We have a lot going on. And even the simple things, like, for example, with my podcast, I mean, just figuring out the basic technology to make it workable was incredible. I mean, we had to go through 3 different producers and all that. So this seems like a relatively tech-proof way, even for a guy like me who's not really a techie. So I really like it, Don. That's kind of a long way of saying, I think building that authenticity, I know in my business, is very, very important, because we're not selling widgets. We're selling a relationship, we're selling a deal partner, and not everybody buys that, because you could look at every investment banking, every venture capital, every corporate lawyer profile in the world, and they're all going to say that they're your deal partner.
Yeah, but here's the thing that's so
You're not only a deal partner, right? It's getting this sort of radical transparency where you can identify, that's my deal partner, or that's the deal partner I want for my friend. So I really like it. I think you've done an amazing job, and it all makes a ton of sense.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll swing it to Carl real quick. what I see is I couldn't do this 600 times in 600 days. Like a month ago, I started taking weekends off, and I'm working harder on this during the weekends than I was on the show. If it wasn't no homework after the show, no preparation before the show, because you can just say if it's a pure hour of you just talking to people, right? And I don't know where this conversation started or where it's going, and that's the beauty of it. Nobody knows, including the audience. So it makes people become more aware because that nugget may come out at any time. And then the more people around you, first of all, you gain through association, you gain through the leverage of their audiences, because, on LinkedIn, only 25% of your connections or followers, no matter how aligned you are with someone else, matches someone else. So if someone has 10,000, you got 10,000, you got 7,500 each of you don't know. Why not bring those networks together, get double the visibility? Because, your message and your knowledge doesn't change by the day. It changes a little bit, but basically you are who you are, and, that's who you are, and that's what people want to see is authentic. So I say, if, as a rule of thumb, if someone's confident in their ability to talk to people about what they do and how they do it, and they think that's a valuable benefit they bring, then that's where the rubber meets the road. Everything else is how many people can get in the audience that really needs to hear this. You're not going to get people who never don't have a business, are never going to sell their business because they don't have one. The key is you want to get the people who are associated with that, either other people in the industry, colleagues that you can learn, share, do some co-promotional things, create events. But you're right. If it's simple, but here's what's a given. I just read some last night. LinkedIn says, and I believe they have enough data, that you get 24 times the comments as an organic video, which to me is a nightmare making up because of overproduction, over editing, making sure you're not offensive, making sure it's clean and bright. People don't like sanitized. They like natural, right? They don't want things that are just, putting lipstick on a pig. Before we move to Carl, Dennis is here. Dennis is another Colorado guy. He's been in heating and cooling for 49 years. Has been here almost every day during the year. Wonderful gentleman, was on the show. I believe if you can sit in the audience, you can face the audience too. And everybody's got a story. And really, that's people want to know is your story, because they're fascinated. And, a funny thing, when you tell a story about your grandfather, 30 other people are thinking of their grandfather immediately, good or bad. So you get to influence people. And the only three things you really can do here is entertain, educate, or inspire, or all three. And if you can give people a reason to like your music before they hear your words and say, hey, I trust this guy, or I know this guy. That's how TV Super Bowl ads get so much. They're trying to get top of mind awareness. They're trying to get things rolling. So, Carl, thank you for patience.
This is what I love about this show, is that one person talks and I get about 5 ideas, and then the other person talks and I get 5 more ideas, and then I'm trying to keep in mind what I want to talk about next. But I think one of the biggest benefits of a LinkedIn live show, the way Don prescribes them, is that as he says, it's inspire, educate, or entertain, and it's not selling. And the fact that you're appearing in front of someone talking about what they're interested in, but there's not one thing you're doing to sell, is viewed entirely differently, because the first time they hear a sales term or a pitch or something like that, their mind starts shutting off. They start backing away. They start feeling that your interest is being put ahead of their interest. And when I was doing podcasting, and I went through the same problem where I was using third parties. They were doing great work, but there was great cost, great prep. But because I had no feedback, and Don talked about leaning into the buffing wheel, because I had no feedback, I kept going, I got to do better. I got to add one more thing. And now it's so choreographed, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that it's a sales pitch. Okay. It comes across, even if I'm trying to do what I'm doing today, it still comes across as a sales pitch because it's too slick. Where if you just kind of sit there and go, hey, listen, I want to talk to you about selling businesses. I understand it's your baby. You're going to have a hard time putting it up for adoption. And that I appreciate that. I understand how hard it's going to be for you to do that. But I'm not selling anything. I'm not telling them to call me. I don't have my 1-900 number up in the corner, flashing on the screen and so forth. I'm just saying, hey, I understand where you're coming from, and here's some of the things I think you're dealing with, and I'm here talking about it. But if I'm not selling, then they're listening better. And they may not be listening to the richness of the content, but they're listening to my tone of my voice and why I'm here and what I'm trying to do. And that way they get to know me. And one of the first rules that I have, one of my 3 keys in raising funding, is they got to know you. We've seen people invest in stuff that makes no sense whatsoever because they knew the person who was pitching the deal. I mean, you're sitting there going, why would anybody invest in that? Well, my second cousin, whatever, who I met at some cocktail party 3 years ago, pitched this to me, so I decided to invest. And you're going, that is not rational. And it isn't. It's all emotions, and the emotions all have to be about, I'd rather talk to someone I know than someone I don't know. And when you get to those super hard decisions, which is what you're dealing with, where somebody's giving up their business, it's almost like talking to your priest or your best buddy or something else, because you have to have that trust relationship for them to do what they need to do, because you're going to tell them to do stuff that either they don't want to do or is going to be painful for them, even if they know they have to do it. And they have to trust you, or they won't engage in that kind of activity. They won't do what they have to get done. And I find this show gives you that opportunity to go, I'm a real person. I'm not going to sell you right now. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to help. I'm kind of paying it forward by continually sharing information about this particular topic, which of mine is raising funding. And after a while, people go, yeah, I've talked to him 10 times. He hasn't tried to sell me yet. I'm okay with that. In fact, I'm so okay with that. The next time I want to buy something, I'm probably going to call Carl instead of somebody else.
Well, and plus, if you can't advocate relationship building and then deploy transactional tactics, and you have to demonstrate, you got to be the model of what you're hoping they become, which is, I have time, you have time. Why don't we take the time? And you see, the thing is when you do things physically, well, you met them for lunch. When you leave them, that's it for them and lunch. What did you get done? How much further do you need to go when you say, hey, you may not even think of selling your business till you know about me and what I do. And all of a sudden you start thinking, maybe this is a good time, or maybe this is the person I've been waiting to talk to. And by having dialogue and not ending it at the end of the show, but beginning it, is who was in the audience that could be a prospective colleague, client, whatever it is. And then you just have something already in common, which is, let's have a conversation. Thanks for supporting the show I was on. Loved your comments. Looks like we got a lot in common. But here's the thing, when you got your own show, now you say, hey, I think you'd make a great guest on my show. First of all, you got a show. Second of all, everybody wants to be on a show. Not everybody can do a show or thinks they can. And I think the other element we have to bring into consideration is cost of entry. What is the risk? There is no money involved here. I mean, it's $20 to get a Restream account, and it's 20 more bucks for, a Canva account. And maybe if you add it all up, you're in for $80. And you can stop at any time. You can accelerate at any time. So I saw my role, because 20 people never were on a show, now have their own show. So I said, hey, I'm just a training grounds. right? Here's where you get your training wheels. Here's how you learn the format, the interaction, the harmony, because it's the energy. It's the vibe of a show. What gets you excited gets people like you excited. What keeps your interest keeps their interest. And if you model that, really making the full step out of the physical to the virtual, getting away, because now you've got leverage, now you've got access. I mean, there's 1 billion people registered on LinkedIn, and this is simulcasting on YouTube, which even has more people. How many people do you need to get exposure for? But here's the thing, consistency. You know, that's why I did it every day, same time. You don't got to think, you just got to show up. And if you like today, there's one tomorrow, which means you don't got to do the land grab while you're here. Plus, you know, people like Dennis get recognized, right? And get included in conversations. Agree, show is important, but show up, not off. And I think it's when people can get themselves into something bigger than themselves, and they're not coming from scarcity where they're punching themselves out of a paper bag all the time. Because it ain't working, I got to give more away. Because it ain't working, I got to do more. No, you just got to do better the way you do what you do. You know, LinkedIn has proven itself. There's people making gazillions, but they figured out not the algorithm, but an unfair advantage on best practices. You know, if you're going to catch, you know, the cream when you got all this milk beneath it, and all these other ways of, we didn't talk about repurposing content, you know, syndicating content, and it's fun, and you're learning something new, and you're getting better because other people around you are getting better. Their questions are getting better. The answers are getting better, and the confidence and belief is there. And ultimately, you think if that person could do it, nothing against that person, I'm sure I could do it if someone explained the 7 steps I need to do. And if you told me what I need to do and how I need to do it and why I need to do it and how long it's going to take for it to get done. I was watching a video of Gary Vee, and I don't know if you know him, but he's huge, right? I don't care for his style at times, but his information's perfect. And the 2 things he said this year is newsletters and live streaming. And he says, I'll tell you what's wrong with most businesses. He had a conference with insurance salespeople, whatever. He said, it's all about brand and marketing. The people who are selling haven't been able to develop their brand or marketing. But if you just continue to, and he said for this first 6 months, you probably never see anything. But you don't know what the gestation period is between when you are seen enough, when you show up enough, and who you're with, right? And I think that's where a lot of people think, hey, I'm looking for more time on the show. No, you're looking for more influence from the show, right? And I even tell people, if you want to be real successful at this, talk more often for less time, because people aren't as passionate about what you're into. And a lot of times people, let me explain why, you know, and go down 3 levels versus, hey, here's what anybody, the 5th grader, will appreciate. You know, if you can talk to the lowest common denominator and meet people where they are and not where you want them to be, so they meet you where you are. And that's where the humility comes in. And the other element is the empathy, right? No one cares what you know until they know how much you care. And in these life-changing situations, because I heard people who sell their business on Friday, 70% are either depressed or have seller's remorse on Monday because they didn't think what happens next. And they forgot, after 25 years, I'm never going to see all my friends at work every day. And I'm not going to be Mr. something. I'm going to be another guy on the beach or another person on a golf course. And I never was that, you know? So I think it's someone who can be a little bit more consoling, you know, share a little bit more insight. So, you know, because you want to see not only people successful, but happy, right? Not only did he do a great deal for me, but he made me feel great all through the deal process. And I think that's what people want to know, because it's their baby. It's what they dedicated themselves. That's who they became. And it's not easy giving it up. And whatever you sell it for, you always think you could have got more, right? That's a natural tendency. But it's also showing people where people go from here, and is this right? And maybe you disqualify some people. I mean, it's not easy, but you can say, listen, this is the worst thing you can do for yourself. Tell me what you just said, the reason you're doing this, right? So maybe you got to come up with a different reason. And at a certain point, you just say, this is trouble, right? And what the challenge is everything relates to something next to it. So if you got a challenging deal with a challenging person, the next person you talk to is going to get some of the remnant of where you just been, and then you can't think anymore. So there's a lot of intangibles. I would say get more demand, get quality, relevant interactions. And then the key is how do you work them up? That's what you used to do anyways, right? If you have quality leads, then it's up to you to, how do I close them? How do I inform them? But I'd rather be in that position where things are lining up in front of me and allowing me to say, okay, I'm the chooser. So getting back to you, Pat, we're already at 51 minutes. When people say, I don't know if I could do an hour, to me, we could have been sitting around a coffee table, and that alone would have made this worthwhile, just because of what we're sharing and motivating each other for. And plus, if you got a third of the time and you got 2 spots before it's your turn, it's like I can consider the audience. I can listen to Carl, and because it's whatever I feel at the time and think, it makes me feel like I'm better off spontaneous. So with that thought, Pat, what's your thoughts? We covered so many areas, and I'm always fascinated when someone has some new eyes and ears who shows up, because the show has changed over time too, along with the people. And it's really seeing oneself as maybe a key player in the industry, somebody who actually becomes the aggregator, the facilitator, like Harvey is. I mean, Harvey's the kingpin. Why? Because he's got the brightest, strongest message going out on a really professional way. And he is the most patient, thoughtful, giving person, and it shows. I think so many people have attributes and no one ever sees them. No one even knows they're there, because it's all focused on the deal, the numbers, So Pat, how do you take that and run with it?
I mean, I like it a lot. I think one of the things that I've kind of been listening, but things going through my head, obviously. What I think is cool about it as well is the ability for people to ask questions and feel comfortable openly, and they probably wouldn't know where to start in a lot of instances, right? They'd go, geez, I got to call this attorney. Am I going to get charged? And, who's this guy, Carl? He looks really big. And so I really like that too, because I think it's disarming. And again, it gets back to building that authenticity and letting people see that you're more than just, another attorney trying to charge a bunch of money or whatever. So I think versus, as an example, doing, and we do this too. I mean, we try to do a variety of different things, but doing webinars where nobody can show up per se. So I really like that element, which is not something I've given a ton of thought to, because I just wasn't that familiar with the LinkedIn Live thing. I mean, I used to see, Don, your stuff showing up. I probably didn't pay much attention. And then I saw a guy recently that I know and like a lot, and he has one, and again, I guess maybe I'm like a dinosaur, but I go, God, this is kind of cool, So I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that ability for people to show up and powwow and hear different perspectives and support each other across the different disciplines and all that. I really like the idea of I'm always were thinking about trying to grow your brand, kind of lighting that match and being able to combine your networks, if you will. So I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. And I really like the ability for people to get on, ask a question that they would otherwise not, it's more like like you said, going to a coffee. And it's very disarming.
Yeah, I think you're truly right based on what you just mentioned. And I think it is, the more comfortable you are, the more comfortable everybody around you is. So you can actually build more comfort and relaxation. And the other element is, I think that you have a strong value and an attribute is your interest in not just being a lawyer, right? I mean, you tried some different initiatives.
Please,
And,
God, maybe I could learn
well,
how to.
here's one thing.
My dream is to have to get paid to talk about deals and not have to deal with other lawyers. So, yeah.
And I think that already elevates you in your direction, because you win by default. You win by the numbers being so overwhelming in your favor for the people who don't get into live streaming. Only 2.2% of the population on LinkedIn is over 55. And what does that say? It's not that there's too many young people. 82% are between 18 and 34. So if you're talking here, you're talking to the majority of people 18 to 34. But here's the other thing. The population who should be here that hasn't shown up, which is people over 50 who see this as a job board, who say, I'm not interested in jobs. I'm not interested in going to an office. But hey, if I could sit in front of my desktop for 3-4 hours a week and talk to some really cool people and share what I know, and there's so much relevance, there's so much mentorship opportunities, and there's people who have time and interest, need to know how to come into this, right? And pretty soon, people would rather do business with people like themselves, right? So 30-year-olds are going to want to do business with 30-year-olds. But where are all the people 50 plus? And then you got to ask yourself, those are the people who are selling businesses, right? So if I can attract those who no one is going after, and there's 1 billion people here, so there's got to be quite a few more than are active. How do I put together a strategy? Because you're absolutely right. You can do it, you can learn it, you can teach it. But the biggest element is teaching how to teach. And, even what's his name? J. Paul Getty said, I'd rather have 1% of 100 people's efforts than 100% of my effort. And if you can look how you can extend your reach through other influencers, and everything here is reciprocal. It's tit for tat, right? You do something, someone's going to get paid somewhere, somehow, or they're not going to do it again. And the people who support you will only support you to the point where they're recognized, appreciated, and supported. And you got to keep oiling, the machine. You got to show up and say, here's something that made it worth it. And I love you and appreciate you. And because of you, all you need is 7-8 people on the sidebar to make your show. Because Kelly made a good point yesterday, and she has an awesome journey on Tuesdays, is that after the show is where all the action is. And now we're starting to repurpose stuff. So you can do a show and have 5, 6, 10, 20-second clips that become your post. So anyways, almost the top of the hour. Carl, I can't thank you enough. What's your thoughts on this show? Because I think every show we both learned quite a bit from.
Well, this is part of the reason I listen to your show as often as I can, and also try to sit in on Kelly's and Harvey's and Beverly's and Leslie's show, because I'm always picking up a little bit of information, and I'm looking to learn more about LinkedIn Live. But Pat, I think one of the things that you find in what you do, because I see similarities of what I do, is you're sitting in deals, transactions that involve lots of different skills, lots of different people. And there's very few people that really understand all the pieces and how they fit together. And this is something that you want to communicate to your clients. But one of the ways to do that is to surround yourself with all the people who have those other skills and so forth. And it's kind of a form of what we talk about on this show is building community. And community is being a bunch of people who support each other and what they do. And LinkedIn Live gives you a very good tool for starting that, that genesis. Like what Harvey has done, where he said, okay, I'm new to franchising, but I'm going to bring in all the people who know about franchising. Next thing you know, he's a curator. He's the hub for all these other people. Well, all these other people are going to bring him more business than he could ever want if he were selling franchising services. But he's basically developing his own business in the coffee industry. But I think that you would find that as you're going forward, that you take all the people you like to work with, you gel them into a community, you invite them to be a guest on a LinkedIn Live show, and you let that grow from there. And this will get you where you want to go. You're gonna be recognized as the person who kind of understands all the different pieces, but you don't have to be all the different pieces. And at that point, customers will come, and they'll be happy that you're constantly putting on information in a way that you're not selling. You're helping them, and that'll make all the difference.
Yeah, everything in life and in business especially is timing and positioning. And like I say, be known before you need. One last thing, I know we're a little bit over. Harvey, again, went to a franchise exposition in London last week. He was sicker than a dog too, and he asked me, what do you think? I said, well, whatever you think. So anyways, he ended up going, and he's got a hat. From my hat, I never wore a hat before I had a show. And so he got a hat, and he even has that on his logo. If you see on the side, he's wearing his hat on his message. And then Carl's got his hat. But here's the point. He went to this big exposition, and he said, everywhere I went, people came up to me and said, you're the franchise show, right? And he didn't even know how rich and deep his message is going, because we get 10 times the audience as what shows up on the comments. And what I found, only 18% of people do anything on LinkedIn, anything, comment, like in a week. The 82% who do nothing make up 80% of everybody's clients. So it's the unseen, the people who don't want to step out of the shadows, but over time they're starting to see you. Or maybe their brother-in-law says, I'm going to sell my business, right? If you take like Denver, it's Frank Azar. You mention his name, it's like, yeah, he's the accident guy. Why? He's everywhere all the time, right? And you can't help but think of his name, right? Before he was the Bulldog, now he's something else, whatever the case. You can be that because there is no competition. There is nobody in your field. I mean, there's a saying, I don't know how nice it is, but they say a one-eyed man is the king of the land of the blind, right? So all you got to do is be there when no one else, and by default, and the longer you're there, the better you are when everybody shows up. Now you're a little bit further. But how much do you need to be satisfied? So anyways, with that, thank you all very much. It's been a wonderful week. Come back Monday. We'll do it all again. I want to thank Pat, and always thank Carl. I learned so much from Carl and Harvey. It's so great to get people in orbit and then see them fly higher than you are and come back to the nest and share everything. Everybody takes off in orbit for the next week and comes back. So anyway, thank you all. It's been a pleasure, and hope you all gained something and can put it to good use. Last words, Pat?
Carl, pleasure. We should connect. Don, this is awesome. I am really grateful for you reaching out and the opportunity. I'm really excited to participate more. So thank you, and keep doing what you're doing.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you, and I'll give you credit for being so good on your first turn at the bat. And I hope it just builds more interest and momentum going forward. Carl, thank you again. Can't thank you enough, so I'll stop thanking you.